Welcome back to the Jenny McCarthy Wahlberg Donnie Wahlberg Show.
Welcome back, Jenny Wahlberg, Donnie Wahlberg.
We you know how much we love our documentaries and we love binge watching shows. And as soon as this documentary came out, we watched it. We might have watched it on the first day it came out.
Yeah, we're usually a little late.
We usually are. We usually wait for people to try stuff out before we do. But obviously, knowing the context,
Content and context.
Thank you.
And all of it.
All of it. We jumped on it. It's streaming now on Netflix. Jeffrey Epstein, Filthy Rich is the name of it. And Lisa Bryant is here on our show. She's the director and executive producer of it. Hi, Lisa. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you watched it on the first day, and I'm flattered, and it's very important material, and anxious to hear what you thought.
I mean, very important material.
Yeah, I was going to say the operative word being filthy, but then I was like, but the rich had so much to do with the allowance of the filthy that I don't think there can be an operative word in those two words, right. Filthy rich. They're they're connected. Yeah.
You know, I had so many emotions, of course, watching this documentary. Frustration, sadness, anger, wanting more justice, knowing the ending was not going to be what we all wanted or still want. You know, we still want justice from other people. It was still so incredibly well done. How long have you been on the Jeffrey Epstein project? Did you start before he passed away? Passed away, that was too polite. Died?
Actually, yes. This project has been in the works for a couple of years prior to what happened in July. I actually started in October of 2018. The project is a Netflix show, but with Radical Media. And James Patterson, the author, actually had written a book that, much like the theme of the show, was largely ignored. It didn't get that much publicity. People didn't want to hear what James Patterson, best-selling author, had to say. So he took it to Netflix and to Radical Media, and immediately they knew the importance of it, and they wanted to get that message out. And I have a longstanding relationship with Joe Berlinger, who's an acclaimed documentarian, and I have worked with him in the last couple of shows that I've done, and we decided to team up for this. They felt a female director was the right choice, and I think it ended up being so. And it was a privilege to, be involved in such an important project, and I'm glad it's being well received, because, these women have been silenced for so long, and Right. It was difficult from the get-go, because we did start when he was alive, and, he is a terrifying person, and it's been it was interesting and difficult, and from the beginning to the end.
How long did it take you to put this all together?
Well, I guess it's been about a 19-month journey, and when I say it was a journey, because, again, starting when he was alive, it was very difficult to get interviews. The main thing that we knew we needed to do, even was a good probably 8 months before he was arrested, that, the women were terrified of him. A lot of them had reached settlements, had non-disclosure agreements. Some hadn't told their parents. Some, there's the shame that comes along with right. sexual abuse. And most of these young women in Florida were underage. And, it's a horrible thing. They were called prostitutes. They didn't want to relive that. It was very difficult. And so we immediately began to get a kind of build a relationship with the attorneys, and then also with the women. So it was a difficult process.
And we see them getting threatened in the documentary, them talking about being threatened. Did you experience any of it, trying to put this together by any of his minions?
Well, we did take some precautions before we started, I will admit, because we know he had shut down ABC. We know they'd shut down other, media, the press, even back, as you see back when the deal was being done. You don't want to report on this. You don't want to report on this. Mm-hmm. And so we took a lot of precautions in our office. We had a camera in there. We had a locked door. We had a safe in there where we put our media initially, because we didn't want them hacking in the computers, someone breaking in and stealing things. So we took it very seriously. And I personally, I experienced a little bit of a threat, but it was actually after he was arrested, interestingly enough, because we went to St. Thomas and were on a boat trying to get some footage around his island to see what was happening. And, it looked totally vacant, as one would expect, right? He's behind bars.
Totally.
But it was being, still run by his people. And as we kind of started to pull into the dock area, all of a sudden these 4 ATVs come at us, and these men had guns and just shoot us off with guns. So it was, I consider that a threat. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I would consider that a major threat. How many, by your estimation, how many girls did he victimize?
Well, in reading court papers and talking to survivors, the scope and scale is mind-blowing. I don't know that we'll ever know, but it's certainly in the hundreds, if not thousands, over the years. You have to remember, this was like 3 decades, 30 years that Epstein lied and cheated and manipulated his way through his life. And honestly, I think almost immediately after graduating high school, which he graduated 2 years early at like age 16, he probably began abusing girls. There was some evidence that he might have, in his first job, started, his grooming techniques with women. And as we learned a lot about sexual abusers and pedophiles and people who are addicted to sex, that, they groom these vulnerable victims, whatever age they are. If they're underage, if they're barely of age, even if they're of age, it's a mind game, it's manipulation. And he had it down to a T, and it was a pattern, and it got worse, and it was worldwide.
And can you explain the role of Ghislaine? Am I saying it correctly? Because people pronounce it differently. Ghislaine Maxwell in Jeffrey's world.
Well, a lot of people will describe, and a lot of them do in the documentary, that basically she was his right-hand man. She was at the top of his pyramid scheme. She was his main recruiter early on. In the Florida case, she kind of disappeared a little bit, but she kind of hid out on the island and was recruiting of-age girls at that time. She realized she was under investigation. She kind of played a lower role, had a lower profile, played a little bit less of a role during that time in Florida. I think she was still playing a big role in his life. She was his girlfriend, sort of, I think for a while probably, but I think they sort of had a mutual beneficial relationship. Her father had passed away very wealthy. She moved to the States. Here was this wealthy guy who kind of took the place of her dad. And initially she started out recruiting these young girls, off the streets, in front of schools, and then gradually groomed those girls to please him. And many girls, not just one, not just 5, not just 10, say that in court documents, and she's been sued and settled, and so she played quite a big role. And then the girls themselves, started recruiting others, which was, a tragedy.
Right. And she participated in the sexual assaults with Jeffrey. She was involved sometimes, correct?
Sometimes. That's what the papers and some of the women have said, yes. Mm-hmm. I don't think all the time, but yes, sometimes.
It's mind-boggling that she's still out there. No one really knows where she is. I know that she received that immunity from that former court case, but is that the reason why she hasn't been convicted or just charged today? Well,
I think I don't know 100%. The FBI certainly, they aren't ignoring her. I do think that there are ways around that could be a roadblock. And I think most people kind of assume that. She was not named in that, but she is protected as kind of one of the unnamed co-conspirators. It's interesting how basically I could be unnamed. You could be unnamed,
totally.
Anybody in the black book could be unnamed, right? I don't know. In theory, it's possible. But I do believe that I know that the FBI is investigating those named co-conspirators. They're investigating Ghislaine. My belief is perhaps, and I don't, the FBI is not letting everybody in on this, but I do believe they're going to go probably after some of the lesser, and I don't say lesser lightly, but the other named co-conspirators, and I kind of think maybe they're hoping they're going to roll on Ghislaine. It's this very tricky thing. It's very difficult. It's like, why didn't Epstein? Well, we know some of the reasons why he didn't, but money and all that and the power.
Right.
But it's a difficult thing to prove. And even though you have a lot of women, it's just really tough, and they have to really, really be buttoned up. The slightest mistake could let her go, and that would really be a travesty.
There's another person that I've seen in the news them trying to interview, and just recently I heard that the FBI is really pushing for it, which is Prince Philip. Am I saying the right name? My brain's just farted.
Prince Andrew.
Thank you. My brain just farted. Prince Andrew. Did they make any progress?
Well, Prince Andrew's name has been out there for, 10 years now almost. I think in 2011, Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who's in the documentary, so bravely came forward in papers and said, I was forced, by Ghislaine and Jeffrey to do for him what they made me do for Jeffrey. Took a lot of courage, very brave. And it kind of, Buckingham Palace immediately, all the denials and all of that, it kind of died away. Nobody was believing, back in that day, it was prior to Me Too, people weren't believing survivors. Virginia was called a liar, a prostitute, all these things. Kind of came back again in 2015. She sued Ghislaine Maxwell. Prince Andrew again became a big issue. Right now, there's a real push to get Prince Andrew to fess up. We know about his disastrous interview on the BBC. Still claiming like that might not even be me in that photo. I never met her, and things that just aren't believable. And so there is a lot of pressure. Her attorneys have been pushing for a long time. At least 6-8 months since this is, since he died, to come forward and tell us what you know. Tell the FBI what you know. It's pretty tough. It's like the president of the United States almost, over there in London. So, he, I guess, doesn't feel the need to do that. Now, on the other hand, he's saying, well, I have offered to cooperate. So it's a little, tit for tat. But the Department of Justice has now entered the picture, and that's the new news in the past few days. And they're demanding it, or saying they're demanding it, or asking him officially and going through his attorneys. And now his attorneys are calling out the Department of Justice saying, hey, this is supposed to be secret stuff here. You're outing us in the public. You're just looking for publicity. You're just looking to embarrass him. You're just looking to, get information any way you can, or make this, even worse for him. I don't know what will happen, but I think it would be very difficult that Prince Andrew will ever end up behind bars if that's, it's just very, very difficult for someone of his stature, which is kind of a bad state of affairs.
So frustrating. We're talking to Lisa Bryant. She's the director and executive producer of the Jeffrey Epstein's Filthy Rich documentary that's streaming now on Netflix. I highly suggest you guys watching it. I noticed that you identified the women as survivors and not victims, and I loved seeing that. Every time I saw that on the chiron underneath, I'd be like, I feel that empowerment. What was behind that decision?
Well, that's what they are. I mean, especially someone, who's been through hell and back, anybody who's experienced trauma like that, it's a lifelong thing. And it's evident in watching the show. I mean, it's some, are, I guess, affected by it more than others, but I don't even know if that's necessarily true. It's a lifelong thing. And many of them have told us that, and they still deal with it on a daily basis. I kind of feel like a surrogate mother to some of them in a way, because again, he preyed on people who were in desperate need of something, whether it was the underage girls who didn't know any better and might have needed money, came from broken homes, or they were abused themselves or raped as children, or these 21, 22-year-olds, which we featured, Sarah Ransom and also Shantae Davies, who were just barely above age, but yet they're still, they came from situations that they didn't know how to get out of. And here comes this rich, wealthy, powerful guy who's so nice in the beginning, and he really groomed them. And made them feel like he couldn't live without him. And in Sarah's case, she felt trapped as well. She couldn't get out. Right. He house and put me in an apartment. He paid for everything, made me feel I couldn't live without him. And on the island where she spent a lot of time, she tried to escape, but she was trapped, and they captured her and brought her back. And right. She had a shorter experience than most, but still had trouble getting out.
It's insane.
Isn't it? And, when you watch it, it makes you go like, oh my God, this is still happening. This isn't just one bad dude. This is still happening right now. I mean, I feel like there's more and more news of it coming out, but it becomes overwhelming, and it has to feel overwhelming to you for being so close to something like this. Do you feel like, oh my God, I need to do more? Or obviously we need to do more, but do you feel that emotional pressure to do more?
It's definitely been a lot. It has overtaken my life, as my family will admit. There's not a day that I haven't woken up thinking about that, or in the middle of the night, oh my gosh, or worrying about how this survivor feels or that survivor feels, and you really you become close to all the people, even the attorneys. Became sources for us and helped us along the way, because everybody wanted to give these women empowerment and a voice and a chance to be heard. So and there could be more. We'll see what happens. We can't follow the breaking news on a day-to-day basis, and that's what became hard. Our documentary, after we'd already filmed, we were in episode 2, actually, had our first episode kind of in the can, as we say, and then he was arrested. Our whole operation changed overnight, and we really kind of had to become breaking news for a little bit. And then after his suicide, and then the conspiracies and all of that, we didn't dive too much into that, but a little bit. But we had to, at some point, you have to cut it off, because every day there's a new thing. It's
Correct.
Still every day. It really is. So we shall see. Hopefully the next big thing will be the arrest of some of these enablers and co-conspirators, because there's still a lot of them. These pilots, drivers, all these people who knew.
Right. When he killed himself or was murdered, when you first heard that he died by suicide, what was your initial reaction?
Well, I had two reactions. One reaction was, I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner. And then the second was, oh my God, these poor survivors are not going to get to see him face justice in court and see him rot away in prison for the rest of their life. And they're not going to get a chance to tell him, have an impact statement and say, what you did to me, and you didn't break me, and that kind of thing. So it was heartbreaking. But on the other hand, 2 days later, I thought he would have been dead, either by his own hand or by someone else's, because certainly a lot of people, didn't want him talking. We know there's a lot of videos out there, and, it was ruled a suicide. So obviously that's what we're going with, but there certainly begs the question of somebody could have offed him.
When you say it didn't surprise you, I know you said someone could have killed him or he could have done it himself. The part about him killing himself that didn't surprise you, is that based on, all the sort of the way he carried himself, the way he was, just even the instances that the girls described, it's I still can't wrap my head around it. And obviously, how can anyone wrap their head around his behavior, if you're not sick or crazy or just an evil person like that? But, a lot of the girls told the same story. He would walk into the room and not say anything. And, whoever brought them or whatever would say, okay, go ahead. And he would just leave the room. Like, it was this detached thing that makes it almost more crueler and weirder and harder to understand. And again, we can never get in his brain, but is that sort of same sick disconnect, that disconnect that he tried to sort of have, I guess, is that sort of what makes you think about the suicide? Like, well, I'm not going to, I didn't face them then, and I'm not going to face them now. Like, he's just a coward or sick. Does that make sense? I'm sorry.
He's a sociopath. He's a sex addict. He's a pedophile. He's in jail. He can't have what he has to have to live every day. He had to have sex a minimum of 3 times a day. And that's what every girl said, whether he had it more or less, but sometimes it was up to 7 times a day. How could someone live that way? And I think he knew his options were up. I mean, we know he tried to commit suicide before he actually succeeded. So I think someone like him is used to flying wherever he wanted, being in control of all of his surroundings, suddenly found himself out of control. And that's not a position he had been in probably 30 years. He always felt he was the smartest man in the room. And I think he probably felt trapped and felt no way out. And, he thought maybe he always had his little passport and all of that, the diamonds and things they found in the safe. But you know what? He was never going to get out. And when that bail was denied, I think that was probably it in his mind. But yeah, that's just my thoughts and what I had learned and felt. So that was my kind of no surprise, and I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner because, he knew it was toast. He was never going to get out. And for someone who's so egomaniacal and, he's a sociopath and narcissist, all those things, he's not going to get to the sweet, cushy deal that he did back in 2008, where he gets to leave his jail cell for 12 hours a day. So that is really my personal thought.
And how convenient that the cameras weren't on in his jail cell or the hallway, and the guards fell asleep. I mean, those things will make any possible conspiracy theorist go nuts. It's hard not to, even if you're not a conspiracy theorist. You're like, hello, we've already seen the FBI be shady. We've seen the Florida cover up. The public officials were the most complicit. So it's like, how do you not even go there? I could see you doing another documentary just on that alone.
Well, it's interesting because when we did start out, we didn't know he was going to die. We didn't know he was going to be arrested. So we were really set out to expose all of the corruption in the earlier case. And all of a sudden, we really had two series in one. I mean, or you could look at it as one long investigation, really, because there was the New York investigation. So it's interesting how we could never have predicted this in a million years. Who would have known that overnight it would have been this international story that, then we're competing with all these other people for interviews and all these documentaries and books and everything else. So it was difficult, before, but fortunately we had done a lot of legwork before anyone else. So the women trusted us, and it was so important to meet with them, talk to them many times, no cameras, and really develop a rapport with them. So we felt, fortunate that groundwork had been done for us. And, I think people who just started that day, might have more of a current investigative feel, but I don't know how you can keep up with that because it's changing so quickly.
Right. And the depth that you had, you can't compare it to anyone's what they've done so far. What about bringing that Florida cover up? Will they face any legal action at all? The public officials that were the most complicit? Well,
people like Alex Acosta and his whole U.S. Attorney's Office at that time, they are being investigated right now. I'm surprised that there has not been, some action taken immediately after the arrest and death. There was talk, amongst, those kind of in the know, but not really in the know, that, there's going to be a bunch of arrests and things, because clearly those public officials, they didn't do their jobs. Money won out, the abuse of wealth and power was ringing loud and clear. But I don't know. We haven't heard anything. I think it's very delicate. It's very deep. I think there's still so much more to come. Really, in this story, there really is. I don't know if it's months, years. I think it's hard.
What I see in part two.
Yeah. Are you continuing to produce and stay on it and follow it? I'm sure it's been such a long process for you and such
your family might not let you.
Emotional process. But because there's more that's going to come out, are you staying engaged in it for a potential, obviously to get to the truth, but to see what, if you can tell the continuation of the story with the same grace that you've been telling this version of the story?
I think definitely are keeping our eyes on it. We're not actively shooting, but if something really big, everybody's waiting on the next arrest, or is Ghislaine or somebody else, something like that, we would follow. We would, again, we're not breaking news. We're not one of the networks that can throw something on the air the next day. So yes and no. Nothing is immediately planned, but I know it's being talked about that, hopefully some of these co-conspirators will be arrested, and that could be an additional episode for sure. It's possible for more, but we're certainly following it every day. We're dealing with it every day, a lot of fallout and things like that. And, not fallout, but just a lot of talk about it. Certainly, right. We're providing extra material on the website. We have a lot of material that didn't get used because it became out of date. So some of that is getting repurposed and put on other platforms that Netflix has. So it is sort of continuing on.
One of the things that was fascinating was to watch Jeffrey Epstein in his deposition tapes. You know, provided a few clips of them, and they were like, they're mind blowing. You wanted more. You got to watch the full tapes, I could imagine. And what was it like seeing him watching those full depositions? Because just the tiny bits made us lose our minds.
Well, yeah, it kind of makes your skin crawl. Let's face it. I think it's so surprising for me the first time I heard him speak, because he is this elusive figure, or that's how he always wanted to be known as. And in a sense he was, because he wasn't, there's mostly still photos. No, he was never anywhere. He avoided kind of the paparazzi. There's a few photos here and there, but he's kind of elusive. So when you hear him speak, it's not like he goes and speaks. He takes President Clinton to Africa, but he stays out of the limelight. It's kind of like, this is his trip. This is what I'm doing for you. And that's how he gathers his circle of friends. He surrounds himself by doing things for others, but yet in a way to get them to trust him and bring him into his circle. He always wanted to be surrounded by people that made him look important and smart. And really, he was just this nobody from Coney Island who ended up lying, cheating, and stealing his way, and stealing all of Lex Wexner's money. And granted, you have to be a smart person to do that, but hearing him speak is interesting, and there's so much in there. There's a lot of pleading the fifth, a lot of other things that for various reasons. If we had more hours, you could have
right.
Elusive is sort of the magic word. It just he even in the depositions, it was uncomfortable to watch. It was also frustrating because he's not saying things. It's like he's just elusive is really the perfect word. And I think you set the series up that way, about this mystery. Like, where did this guy even come from? And I think it worked because in a creative sense, I'm speaking about,
Producing.
the justice of the case, and everything is the justice. I'm speaking strictly as a filmmaker right now. You really did set that up, and it was important because I didn't know. I only know the headlines, and I know what I hear, and I know what I read on, the internet or whatever, and what people say. But to really get that and to start to see that pattern of him, like this whole pattern of just elusiveness in it. I don't even know what to make of it. The whole thing is just kind of shocking and unsettling. But I just applaud the way that you did it, because it showed him going back there and showing that elusive, sort of deceptive beginning really made you have to see the consistency of his behavior and that elusive, manipulative behavior every single step of the way through the documentary.
Thank you. And that was our goal, really, is to educate the public who really don't know anything beyond the headlines. Is we wanted everybody to understand that our officials didn't give them the background on what had happened, and how, time after time, his wealth and power just won over everything. And thank God for the Me Too movement that helped empower these women to come forward. And we really, those two things, giving these women a chance to speak their truth. And they drove the narrative, really. They helped tell his story. And through his depositions, he helped tell his own story. And, it's not a pretty one, and it can be a tough watch, but I feel it's so important. So thank you for the attention that you're giving it. And,
it's so important. And you've done such an amazing job. I can't wait to see what you do next. And I just wanted to reach out and hug those survivors. So if you'd still talk to them, send them our love. Not that they give a shit about us, but I did. I just wanted to reach through the TV and hug them.
The support they're receiving, since coming out, it's been amazing. They're saying, it changed my life. I feel so empowered. I talked to Brad Edwards and Mike Piston, who was a private investigator, just a couple of days ago. Said since the documentary came out, so many other women have come forward. So many new clients saying they too were victimized. I watched this documentary, and now I want to tell my story. I want to, lawsuit or whatever it may be, and that's what feels good. That's the biggest, reward for me. So So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Lisa, Bryant, thank you so much for your amazing work. You guys check out Jeffrey Epstein's Filthy Rich. It's streaming right now on Netflix. And, you please feel free to come back on my show and promote anything you want. I think you're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.